nearly 35 years ago when I was in preschool and my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 32. I spent the majority of my childhood in and out of cancer treatment centers, sitting with my mom as she received chemo treatments, spending the nights curled up in a hospital bed, and watching her cry at home as a wisp of hair would make their way down the bathtub drain. Sadly, at the age of 39, my mom's breast cancer battle came to an end as she fearlessly took God's hand and made her permanent home in eternity. When I look back on the years I spent with my mom, I cannot recall many memories prior to her being sick. As sad as it is for me, I can only imagine how emotionally painful that had to have been for her. Having my own kids now, and having surpassed her years on earth, I cannot fathom the thoughts she must have had. I knew at the time that the years I had left with my mom were likely numbered, but as a child, I tried to ignore the inevitable and acted like everything was okay. I vaguely remember one crisp summer day sitting out on our plush 3-acre lawn with my mom and my 2 older brothers and listening to my mom tell us, "One day I won't be here with you." And that is all I could allow myself to absorb. Back then, I wanted to tune out what was so hard to hear, but I would give anything now to remember what else she had to say. What I do know now, that this is likely where my mental health battle began. And at the same time, I also knew that I wanted to someday do what I could to honor my mom. Fast forward through nearly a decade of my adolescent and teenage years, the years that a young girl would greatly benefit and learn from having a mother to guide her. The time in my life that I still look back on and wonder, what if? Those years of mine were plagued with the normalities of school, friends, dating, sports, and all the things that I longed for sharing with my mom. Considering the circumstances, I had a great time. I was a friend to all. I did well in school and sports, and was even offered several scholarships to play soccer, none of which I cashed in on. From the outside, things looked normal, and for the most part, they were. But I know now this is coming from someone that likely would have benefited greatly from therapy. Unfortunately, it wasn't a favorite thing to do back then, or I appeared to be doing well enough that I didn't need it. Another thing I wondered to myself, what if? What if I would have been introduced to a healthy way to grieve? Would it have changed the outcomes of future struggles and hardships I would face? What I have realized is that after loss, there is an abundance of support and love that showers the grieving, but as time moves on, everyone else's lives go back to a normal routine, and you are stuck trying to figure out what that means for you. 30 years ago, cancer wasn't really talked about, therapists weren't plentiful, and I got the impression that feelings were better off ignored than talked about. Maybe if everyone acted like they were okay, then everyone would really be okay. But it wasn't okay that I didn't have a mom. It wasn't fair then, and it isn't fair now. No matter what could have been done differently back then, and no matter how many therapists I could have seen, nothing would have changed the fact that my mom's time on earth was done, and all of us were here left to live on. And though I may not have had a mom, I was lucky enough to have a best friend in my dad. Being the youngest child with 2 older brothers, to say I was a daddy's girl and a little overprotected is an understatement. I looked to my dad for guidance and for fun. He was a child at heart, and his heart was pure gold. To know my dad was to love him, but more on him later. After graduating high school, I married young. I chose the easy way out for schooling and went into a specialized program in the health field, but not what my heart was intended for, nursing. To offset the feeling of me wanting to do more to honor my mom, I set out on a journey to raise awareness for breast cancer. Over 3 consecutive years, I participated in the Susan G. Komen 3-day, 60-mile walk and raised over $10,000 for breast cancer research, education, and community-based programs and advocacy. I felt this was, thank you. I felt this was a step in the right direction to keep my mom's memory alive, but deep down, I knew I still wanted to do more. So in early 2011, with 2 young kids at home, I made the decision to pursue my dreams and become a nurse. I soon completed my CNA class and immediately got a position at the Waverly Health Center. I had the best nurse mentors and friends at a time that I would soon need it most. In the fall of 2011, I surpassed another hurdle and began taking pre-nursing classes while I waited for my spot to open up in the nursing program. I stayed at home during the day with my 2 young children, then spent the evenings either working on the med-surg floor in the hospital or in classes. Then, sadly, just 10 days before my 28th birthday, while sitting in my night microbiology class, I received a phone call with the worst news of my life. Abby, Dad was just killed. My brother's voice echoed in my head as I fell to my knees in the empty hallway of Grundy Hall at Hawkeye Community College. Tragically, my dad and his dog were the victims of a hit-and-run accident. In an instant, time suddenly froze. A short while later, I would learn the person behind the wheel never attempted to help my dad, but instead called help for herself in an attempt to cover up the scene and hide my dad's body. A man that would go out of his way to help anyone and do absolutely nothing to hurt anything or anyone else was disregarded, pulled to the side of a ditch, and buried in corn stalks. This is where he and his dog would remain until my stepmom would find them after returning home from work a short time later. At this very moment, my mindset quickly turned into, why me? And this is where my mental health spiraled out of control. The night my dad was killed, my world shut down. Soon my days turned into sleepless nights, and the life I once knew became a distant memory. What started out as shock with his tragic death quickly turned into a life of deep depression. Depression set in, and anxiety took hold, and my life fell out of control. Days were filled with investigators, police reports, empty promises, and an unbelievable feeling of loneliness. I began to feel the same abandonment that I felt with my mom, but only this time it was tenfold. This time I didn't want to turn to anyone else. I only wanted my dad. No matter how many people showed up at my house, no matter how many people called to check on me, no matter how many times I heard, "I'm sorry," nothing took the pain away. Eventually I started telling everyone I was fine. But spoiler, and as you can guess, I most certainly was not. I quickly went back to work, picking up all the holidays, weekends, and nights, everything I could possibly do to avoid the ticking time bomb in me that was about to explode. But instead of exploding, all the anger and sadness within me slowly started to leak out. You see, within 15 hours of my dad being killed, I was in the office of a therapist being prescribed antidepressants. For whatever reason, this great deed by my employer set something off inside me, and I refused to listen to anyone at that point. How dare someone try to help me? Wasn't I supposed to feel depressed? My dad, an only living parent, was just killed, and I felt like I was being told how to deal with it. Over the next few weeks, people slowly stopped showing up and people slowly stopped calling, and I honestly couldn't blame them. What do you say to someone with so much hurt and who has faced so much tragedy? Are there even the right words to say to someone who has faced more loss than most people twice her age? Just as the presence of others slowed, and just as the lives of others slowly returned back to their normal pace, I slowly stopped eating. As though it was a small victory in my mind, my mind led me to believe that I finally had control over something. I had control over what I put in my mouth and what the number on the scale said. I started to become numb and emotionless. And to me, it felt wonderful, but for all the wrong reasons. For once, I wasn't crying daily. I physically couldn't. For once, I didn't care what others were thinking or doing. I emotionally couldn't. And for once, I wasn't even thinking because I couldn't. I shut out nearly every person in my life. I became obsessed with calorie counting, or lack thereof. I would limit myself to no more than 400 calories per day. I was merely surviving off of chicken broth and oyster crackers. I was picking up a ridiculous amount of hours at work to put my focus on others. I was in denial of my problems as I watched the numbers on the scale continue to decrease. If ever there was a day that I felt I had too much, I would take laxatives, just in case. The more people pried, the more distant I became. I knew the chance of my own survival was decreasing, and I was actually okay with it. I started to envision myself being reunited with my mom and dad, and it brought me so much comfort. Even though I had family to live here, including my 2 own children, my rational thinking was no longer. I allowed myself to only think about myself because I felt like no one else knew the intensity of the pain. Continued thoughts of why me consumed me every day. I began to think about how much easier life would be without me. And though I never physically acted on it, I knew eventually my body was likely to give out. Lucky for me, I had 2 people behind me that were not going to sit back and let that happen. Not to disregard all the others that loved and care about me, like my aunt who is here today, who has been with me every step of the way and has been a huge part of my life. There were others that expressed their concerns, but I chose to ignore it. I had these 2 unbiased and pure-hearted gold women who I would see consistently since my dad was killed. My physician, who I was doing weekly appointments with for depression, anxiety, sleep deprivation, and by this time weight checks for clinically diagnosed anorexia. And to my counselor, who I was seeing weekly to help work through all the above diagnoses. Little did I know that these 2 pulled together and made some phone calls and established plans to get me additional help. After checking into an appointment with my nurse practitioner, she sat me down and said, "Abby, I can no longer do anything else for you. You need more help than I can give you right now, and I cannot sit back and watch you die. I made arrangements for you to get the help you need. Would you like to call your family, or would you like me to?" I let her make the phone call. A grueling 4 months after my dad was killed, and on the exact day that the girl responsible for taking my dad's life was arrested, I walked through the double set of the doors of the University of Iowa Hospital while giving back all control to save my life. My initial exam did not come with great news. My blood work showed how malnourished I was, and the EKG showed I was either on the verge of a heart attack or I had already suffered from heart troubles. My heart was working so hard to keep me going. It was as though my heart was literally breaking. But unlike my dad, I was given another chance to live. And for the next 3 months, I ate what I was told to eat, when I was told to eat. I went to sleep and woke up on their schedule, not mine. I handed over my entire self to strangers at the lowest point in my life. Yet I learned more about myself, and I was thriving. During this time, I began to realize I never fully grieved the loss of my mom. I was only 11 years old when she passed away, and at such a young age, it was hard for me to process reality, so I pushed away and ignored all the hard feelings. But they soon resurfaced with the loss of my dad. While inpatient, I met an amazing group of people who shared the same diagnosis as me. Once a new person walks in, they are quickly befriended, and you soon learn more about each other in the short time of meeting than you know about others you've known for your whole life. A deep connection is made, and you lean on your new people to get through the hard days. I worked with so many therapists, psychologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, doctors, nutritionists, nurses, technicians, and looking back, and I can honestly say these people have left such an amazing mark on my life. I have never in my life worked through so many emotions as I did while I was there. I cried, I got angry, I broke down, but I was also humbled, comforted, and had so many laughs. An environment that was so sterile, yet unhinged, became my new home, and I would be lying if I didn't say it felt great. Whether it was the emotional, physical, or mental piece of me was healing, I was beginning to feel human again. But after being discharged from the hospital, the real work began. I went back to work, continued forward with my nursing school, I got a divorce, and to all of our surprise, just a short 6 months after being arrested for killing my dad, the girl who had been sentenced to 10 years in prison was released. I ultimately spent several more years mourning the loss of both my mom and dad. Through the midst of it, I was set up on a blind date by a friend I met in my CNA class. I went on to marry her brother, and my husband and I became an instant family of 7. I began reaching plenty of goals, but had many setbacks. I no longer restricted calories, but I did have a breakdown and gave in to self-harm. Out of complete anger, I burnt my arm with a curling iron and had to go be seen by the doctor for help. I worked through many emotions alone while crying on the bathroom floor, in between the 4 walls of many therapist offices, trying to advocate for what was best for me. I got to a place in my life that I wanted to learn how to manage my feelings, and when I felt them, instead of being medicated to not feel any. I began cognitive behavior therapy and went off all prescription medications. Bouts of anxiety still surface, especially with continued biannual testing and imaging to monitor my own risk for breast cancer. My husband and I worked together through blended family life, infertility, pregnancy, and then childbirth just 10 days before graduating nursing school. Then, 8 short months later, another pregnancy and baby, which brought our his, hers, and ours family to now 9. Juggling 7 kids is a feat in itself, and if I had another hour to stand up here, I would go further into that chapter. Through all of this, I did find that the more honest I became with myself, the more honest I became with others. I started connecting with others through my story. I soon realized that the more joy I focused on during the hard days, the better I felt. I found a passion for creating and writing as a way to express myself, and in turn, I started receiving messages of hope from others. I now use the anniversary of my parents' passing and their birthdays as a way to pay it forward and spread kindness. Instead of, why me, I started thinking, because of me. Have you ever made someone else smile from a simple, kind gesture? I encourage you to challenge yourself on your next tough day. Buy a stranger's coffee, leave a note for someone to find, call instead of text message someone that you've been thinking about. Someone will smile because of you. The more difficult the day is, the harder I fight back and the better I feel. With every passing milestone, life becomes a little brighter. Just a few years ago, I was sitting in these seats listening to others give testimony with their story. I sat there and wondered if one day I could stand before others and speak of my journey. I never thought my story was worthy enough of sharing. More specifically, from a religious standpoint of being saved or finding God, I was looking for a direct sign, the ones you hear about people talking about, the stories of when they fell to their knees at their weakest moment and they heard God tell them what they needed to hear. I fell to my knees plenty of times, but it wasn't until recently what I realized I was hearing from God was the silence I needed. It's as if I was looking to the sky for some writing in the clouds saying, "Hey, Abby, this is God," expecting to have my life answers spelled out for me, waiting to see why everything in my life has happened the way it did. Instead of seeing a huge sign displayed in front of me, I started noticing all the small signs I was receiving. I was being blessed with newfound friendships that were faith-based. I started seeing pieces of God through my children's eyes. I would find a random object like a rock, a piece of paper, or even spilled milk, all in the shape of a heart. I started feeling sunsets, not only seeing how beautiful they are, but how internally happy and comforted I am while watching the sun melt into the earth's ground. I started feeling comfort in decisions that I was making and finding courage to finally do what was best for me, knowing that I always had God on my side. I started hearing His presence in everyday things. The silence I heard when crying out alone opened my ears to His true gifts I have received. My kids' laughter, the crows cawing, the light rain on the roof on the days I needed peace so badly. The thoughts in my head had always been too loud to notice the blessings that surrounded me. Then, in the spring of 2023, my purpose became more apparent. I was selected as part of a publishing school, thanks to Hannah, to take my story and create something I am passionate about. In my lifetime, I have had plenty of things taken from me, but my story is one that no one can take. What started out as an idea to write a book became a feeling of needing to do something different. As I grabbed one of my mini journals to start planning, I knew what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to design a space for people to go that encompasses a range of feelings. I created a story within, which is a self-guided, refillable journal that consists of sections on grief and growing, inspiration and motivation, happiness and wholesome, organize and prioritize, and blank spaces, knowing that emotions and feelings are constantly changing. This journal is a place to go no matter how you are feeling. The goal behind the journal was to make it refillable with additional chapters being created to encourage others to keep your story going, because we all have a story inside. Also, a simple reminder given to you with the bookmarks that I made for all of you guys. I once heard a quote from Maggie Kuhn, and a piece of it states, "Stand before the people you fear and speak your mind, even if your voice shakes. When you least expect it, someone may actually listen to what you have to say." Naturally, I'm a writer at heart, but I thank you for the time to listen to me speak about my story today, because no matter how much my voice may shake, there is nothing to fear about who you are and who you are meant to be, because just possibly someone out there may need to hear what you have to say. Thank you.